Welcome to a 5th of Jack Gaming. It is the 4th of July, fireworks day. Awesome for the United States of America. So happy 4th if you're in the States. And to all the people that have served, currently serving, and future serving, I guess is the way to say it. Thank you for ended up serving and for your sacrifice. And thank you for protecting this, I believe, wonderful country. Alright, with that said, let's talk about the subject that we end up coming over with it. If you ended up seeing our big goals that we ended up having, or our challenges that we ended up going with, we ended up having a big challenge that we put in front of us. I happily is 1/5 of the way through it. I legitimately just finished it. It is Captain America by Ed Brubaker, Volume 1. So I got some thoughts about this, and eventually we'll get there. But I want to end up talking about it. This is kind of seen as the go-to run for Captain America. This has 1 of 5 books. That's right, 5 books is how many you have for this. But like this ended up having a couple movies, or a movie inspired by it, which you ended up having Captain America, Winter Soldier. And when you do read it, you'll end up seeing why that's like that. And there's going to be a point where I'm going to have spoilers, but I'll give you a heads up before we end up diving down there. Alright, let's talk about the book here. This is a direct market cover that you end up having. I believe this book is out of print, but it's a solid book itself. I ended up enjoying what I ended up reading. But we'll have more reviews on that when we review the book itself. So the dust cover is neat, just like you said, or like I said, there's the front, the spine, and the back, having the typical Marvel Comics background, all breaking down different issues. This has issues 1 through 25 of Captain America's 65th anniversary special, and Winter Soldier Kills One Shot. That's all that's included into this. So you have 26, 27. You have 27 issues that's going to be found in this book. At the time when this was coming out, this had a $100 cover cost to it. And, well, I ended up picking this off from one of my friends, the all-in-one nerd, Mr. Bluesky. So, that's nice of him. But then, you have this awesome art. It's a nice hardcover that you end up having included with it. Something that I do have a problem with is at the very top. I don't know if you can see it, but the glue has separated a little bit from the main book of it, but that's only at the top compared to the bottom. So construction wise, I did stretch it out. It was, I think, stretched out before. So I would end up giving that probably about a 7 when it comes to the construction. But we're not just here for that. We're also here for the story and everything with that. And at this point, this is where I'm going to go with that. There's going to be spoilers ahead. So I'll put some timestamps. It's going to be right down here where you can end up skipping the entire thing. This is where we're going to open up the book and then give a general breakdown of the story of itself. However, if this is something you're interested in to picking up in the future, because I believe it's out of print, but with Marvel, it always comes back into print. You can go visit the folks over at Grant Price Books, where you can use the discount code of 5th of Jack to save $2 off. Or if you have 4 or more books, use the code Jacket Together to save 5% off your entire order instead. Orders of $30 or more ends up getting free shipping. And they also have a way where you can end up selecting how you ended up wanting to ship it. Rather it's bubble wrap, peanuts. I know peanuts is a hot thing, but they're non-toxic and they're biodegradable. And then you also have it where they end up having their own cardboard that goes over with it. Or if you just don't care, you can say any, and then you can end up putting the order in. This code is evergreen, and it's a nice way to be able to help the channel and help yourself to a nice little discount. Alright, without further ado, let's switch the camera over and go ahead and go through this little story that we have. Instead of totally breaking down what's happening in the book, we're going to go over events that end up coming over into this story. Starting off with the first event that happens in the story, we end up seeing the process of the Red Skull being taken out, with a little bit background story that came over with it, explaining what he was taking care of and what he was taken out for. Also in this storyline, we end up having where we end up learning about the myth of the Winter Soldier that turns out to be not a myth, but ends up being a familiar person for Captain America, and everyone ends up to get to know. In the story, it also elaborates later on down the road of how the Winter Soldier ended up getting made, and we also get the big reveal of multiple different times of a hero that we ended up knowing that used to be working with Captain America. Who is this person? Well, it's going to end up being Bucky, a person that he worked with during the process of the war, where he ended up fighting a bunch of the Nazis, and in the process thought he was formerly gone. Well, Steve did. And then we also get exploring into other Captain Americas that was also playing the mantle while Captain America was gone. Get exposures to characters such as Nomad that we didn't know of before going over and breaking down. And then we get a couple other ones that's along in the process. Another thing that we end up getting to see is to see that relationship with Captain America and Agent 13. It's a nice, loving relationship that they ended up having along in the process of this entire story, and you see that being kind of like a sub point of the entire story that you generally in this book. I hope that continues on into the next series. We also have Crossbones that's in here as a focal point because we end up finding out that the Red Skull had a daughter. That's right, that she was ended up becoming brainwashed and being able to be trained and everything. Her alter ego ends up becoming Sen. But we also see the process of deprogramming her through Crossbones and trying to keep on doing it, where we end up finding that Crossbones and Sin have a relationship, and this is going to be something that's going to be continued down later into this book. This also has deep connections with the Invaders, where you end up having Namor being involved with it, and also the Human Torch, I believe. It was kind of weird. But overall, it was a very enjoyable process of a story. That was a nice solid goes over with it. Now we're coming over with the review of the book. So overall, I would end up giving the story of the book a 9 out of 10. It was pretty stellar, and it ended up having, like, it always felt like a big action movie that you ended up having. It was pretty tight, had some pretty awesome art that came along with it. You do have one issue that does go over into the Young Avengers omnibus that you ended up having the entire crossover that you ended up seeing. I believe that was the Winter Soldier, Winter Kills. That was a one-shot that you ended up picking up into that, which is a nice little double dip that comes over with it, and does actually add over with the story that you end up having over this way. It was kind of a little bit harder with the Captain America, the 65th anniversary. I didn't really care for the art, and the story was okay. It seemed like it was a little bit patched together, but it was an anniversary book. Overall, though, the build-up that you ended up having that goes over with it when you find out something, and a certain character ends up going, but then you see something that happens that builds up to a new villain or revision of a villain that comes over with it, was an awesome way that came over with it. Having the classic combination ended up happening. Also, you have a relationship between Cap and a certain someone that's in the story, trying to keep it a little bit spoiled free, that goes over with it. That is an awesome way, that is a very good representation that you come over with it. You also have a bunch of different stories and some other facts that you end up learning along the way, and it's definitely a book I would strongly suggest picking up if it ever gets a reprint. Don't go crazy and picking it up for out of print prices, because eventually, at some point, Marvel does do a pretty good job on reprinting their books. Now, when it comes to the construction of the book, obviously I have to ding a little bit because it has a little bit of separation somewhere at the top. So I would give that an 8 out of 10. because it's still pretty solidly together, and I do like the overall presentation of the book itself. So the book as a whole, I'll give this a 9 out of 10, and I'll definitely would suggest picking this up and possibly picking up the entire series. Like I said, this is book 1 that we've went into with this series. So we're only a fifth of the way through his run. And we're going to try doing his entire run in the month of July. We may have some spillovers that we goes over with it. But after we get done with the entire run, we'll have our final thoughts about the entire series itself in its own little video. So, if you're liking the content that we're putting over, go bash that entire subscribe button, and we will return you with some good content that we're going to be coming down in the future. Make sure you hit that little bell to be notified whenever that content does come your way. Also, if you're liking the reviews that we're going over, we're trying a few different things that goes along with it. And I got this way too far. We got a few things that we're trying to go on with it. And we appreciate you going over with this and following us. Don't forget, we have that goal of 250 subscribers. As soon as we end up hitting that, we're going to go over, review that entire 3 Jokers, and we'll be giving out a copy of that. Thank you for watching, and until next time, we'll see you later.